Gap shooting. It's the method used by the top competitors today. But what is it? Well, that's the question we'll answer this week on Archery 101. Hey everybody, Greg here. There's a ton of information out there on gap shooting. And much of it, you have to admit, is pretty much inaccurate. The reason for that is that people that talk about gap shooting don't use it. Never tried it, or if they did try it, they didn't stick with it. What they're doing is they're just passing on impressions, second or even worse, third-hand information. Well, you might ask, what about you, Greg? What do you know about it? Are you any different? Yeah, I've been using gap for the past year, and I have to admit, I love it. It's elevated my game big time. I've learned a lot, and that's what I'm going to share with you in this video series. Now, the goal of this video is not to teach you how to gap shoot. Alright, that's for another day. What this video is going to do is show you exactly what gap shooting is, so you can talk about it intelligently and with authority. So let's get started. Here we have an archer. If we drew a line from his arrow to the target, and if the arrow flew perfectly straight, this would be its flight path. Arrows don't fly straight. They have a trajectory. Now, unfortunately, what many people think is that an arrow's trajectory is a nice smooth arc like this. In reality, the trajectory of an arrow is more elliptical in shape, sort of like this. Once an arrow reaches its peak, it will drop off rapidly. The descent of the arrow is much shorter than the ascent of it. In other words, the arrow climbs longer and drops for a shorter distance. Now, with that said, as a general rule, the heavier the draw weight, the faster the arrow, and with that comes a flatter trajectory. If it's a lighter draw weight, it's a slower arrow and a more pronounced trajectory. See, that is why people are chasing speed, for the arrow will have a flatter trajectory. So why was all this important? Because what a gap shooter does is they find out the trajectory of their bow and they compensate for it. To show you what I mean, let's go back to that archer. Here is our archer. This time, we're going to add some distance markers. And again, let's put down the direct line from the arrow to the target, which can also be referred to as line of sight. And again, we'll show you the trajectory of the arrow. Now, before we go any further, let me say that what I'm about to show is purely hypothetical. These numbers are not real and are just being used to only illustrate a point. What a gap shooter does is they find the difference from where the arrow is pointing and the trajectory at different distances. Most archers will break it down into 5-yard increments. And how do they find that difference? Well, I'm going to show you that in another video. But today, let's just focus on what it is. So, for this archer, at 10 yards, the difference between the arrow's line and the trajectory is 13 inches. That 13 inches is their gap. Now, if we push it out to the next one, at 15 yards, the difference is 15 inches. At 20 yards, the difference is 16 inches. The difference is gaining as the trajectory of the arrow keeps climbing. At 25 yards, it's 18 inches. And this trend would continue until the arrow hits its peak, until it starts dropping back down, and then the gaps will start coming back down in distance. Now, before we move on, you need to know that how you draw. By this, I mean if you use split finger or 3-under, will have a huge effect on the size of your gap. If you shoot split finger, you will have much larger gaps. And this is due to the arrow being farther away from your eye. That is why most gap shooters use the 3-under method, for it brings the arrow closer to the eye and shrinks their gap. So, using the gap method, if an archer wanted to hit a target 10 yards away, he would aim 13 inches below it. And that, my friends, is gap shooting. All right, there you have it. Now, there's a bunch more to it. All right, the finer points and details I didn't cover. Why? Because I wanted to solely focus on what gap shooting is. And gap shooting is a method of shooting where the archer compensates for the trajectory of the arrow. No more, no less. In later videos, I'll show you how to figure out your gap and how to use that gap on a 3D course, target archery, hunting, in all different ways. So keep an eye out for those videos. Alright, boys and girls, if you liked the video, give me a thumbs up. If you didn't, hey, give me a thumbs down. You got something to say? You got a question? Put it in the comments down below. Please share and check out our sister channel, 3D Archery. And most importantly, don't forget to subscribe. And I'll see you next time on Archery 101.